Working on the recent video about our shop-built drawer slide jig reminded me of the assortment of tips, techniques, and assembly aids that have been passed down in our shop over 3 generations. So we put together this collection of the best of these little gems. We hope you find them as useful as we have. To get the most out of these tips, it helps to have a basic understanding of specific drawer systems. To get an idea of how much those systems have changed, let's take a quick look at how cabinet construction has developed, at least in the United States. As shown in this high school vocational counseling film from 1940, for much of the first half of the 20th century, cabinet making, like finish and most architectural carpentry, was done on the job site as opposed to in a dedicated shop facility, while teams of skilled millers, joiners, trim carpenters, and others applied their trades. The cabinet maker would also work on location to build both residential and commercial casework, one step and one piece at a time. Large or complex assemblies like sculpted staircases or this magnificent entry door were exceptions to this practice, but as a rule, cabinetry was built in place as continuous assemblies, not by adjoining a series of individual boxes, as is the norm today. The concept of shop-built modular cabinetry didn't really take hold until the post-World War II housing boom quickly created a need for volume production of just about everything that goes into building a home. The combination of this unprecedented demand, a virtually exploding tract home industry, lumber shortages, and manufacturers with an urgent need to transition from war production back to consumer goods, gave us some new and interesting products. One of these efforts took the modular cabinetry idea in a completely new direction, with brightly painted, stamped steel cabinets. One of the more successful companies to try this was the Youngstown pressed steel division of Mullins Manufacturing Corporation of Warren, Ohio. As shown in this 1951 sales training film, Youngstown even offered appliances and porcelain sinks that were actually built into the cabinets. These cabinets were an innovative idea that filled an important need at a unique time, but the concept had pretty much run its course by the early 60s, when more open floor plans transformed the kitchen from a utilitarian workspace to part of the entertainment area, which in turn drove up the demand for the warmth of wood tones and cabinetry that looked and felt more like furniture. As a kid, I was familiar with a few homes that came with these steel cabinets as original equipment. I suspect they also fell out of favor because the doors and drawers were noisy. In most cases, they gave the room terrible acoustics, that is, they reflected rather than absorbed sounds. They dented easily, and when it came time to repaint, most homeowners lacked the skills and equipment to apply what was basically an automotive finish.
Why do dishes the old-fashioned way when Youngstown Kitchen's automatic dishwasher washes them the modern way?
The earliest drawer systems used no hardware at all. Let's check back with our cabinet maker friend from the vocational counseling video. Here he is hand-fitting cutting boards and drawers to their openings. This drawer box will literally ride on those edges that he's planing. Here's a closer look at the typical internal carcass construction that would have been used with this system. Because the bearing surfaces are wood, they expand and contract with changes in humidity and temperature and wear down considerably over time. An occasional coating of furniture paste wax would help them slide smoothly, but this system was a bit of a pain to maintain and keep adjusted. This same basic construction is still used in some furniture, but it's impractical for drawers that see heavy daily use, like in kitchen or bath cabinets. The first manufactured drawer slides were stamped steel and supported the drawer with a pair of rollers mounted at the sides of the cabinet opening. A guide wheel fastened to the rear of the drawer box rides in a single track mounted under the drawer. These work with light loads, but the action is not smooth. Access to roughly the rear third of the drawer is limited, and they just don't age well. Today this design is rare, but they are still available for some reason and are used for inexpensive, mass-produced cabinets and furniture. The next step in slide development was this painted steel type, also known as Epoxy Slides, a reference to the type of paint that produces their hard, durable finish. While concealed undermount versions exist, the most common type of epoxy slides are mounted to the sides and or bottom of the drawer box and to the sides of the cabinet opening, and consist of a drawer member and a corresponding cabinet member, with each member designated as a left or right-hand component. They glide on a couple of nylon wheels that ride in tracks formed in the two members, and the last couple of inches of each member slopes downward slightly, providing a gentle self-closing action toward the end of the drawer's travel. These molded plastic sockets are available for face frame applications. Full extension versions are also available, but with the standard styles, access to the rear of the drawer is still limited, and they're not designed for heavy loads. But overall, epoxy slides do their basic job pretty well, and the better brands have a surprisingly smooth action for this price point. If there is a go-to or workhorse drawer slide in modern custom cabinet making, it would have to be this telescoping ball bearing type. For cabinet and furniture applications, these are available from 8 to 28 inches long, with load ratings of up to 200 pounds. Special versions for file drawers and other heavy-duty applications can handle up to 500 pounds. Their strength and smooth action comes from steel ball bearings that support the drawer member both from above and below. All slides of this type have a release that is either pressed or pushed up or down to remove the drawer from the cabinet. As shown here, once the drawer member is removed, we get a good look at the sliding bearing cage that's at the heart of this design. The thin metal in the cage body can be bent easily, so when replacing a drawer, it's best to position the cage at the front of the slide and gently reinsert the drawer until both drawer members are at least 3 or 4 inches inside the cabinet members before pushing the drawer completely closed. For face frame applications, most telescoping slide manufacturers make rear mounting brackets to fit their particular slide profile. In some cases, these are attached to the slide with screws, but most just snap on and hold themselves in place by friction. Soft close versions are popular because they are cost-effective alternatives to other more complex soft close designs, but their spring-loaded action is not especially strong, and they must be installed precisely in order to function correctly. For this reason, the soft close telescoping slide has gotten sort of a bad rap, but if they're installed parallel, coplanar, and square to the face of the cabinet, they work just fine. In this age of CNC accuracy, Many cabinet makers would be hard-pressed to explain the purpose of these tabs, but when case parts were mainly produced manually and tolerances were less precise, these provided a way, at least in frameless cabinet construction, to fine-tune the fit of a drawer. That is, if a drawer box is a little too narrow for its opening in the cabinet, these tabs may be bent to offset the excess width of the opening. For example, the gap between the slide body and the sidewall of this cabinet was created by bending the tabs to make such an adjustment. Again, because most modern volume production shops cut out their parts on CNC routers and not with saws, such workarounds are seldom needed anymore. In the heyday of American luxury cars, one slogan was, "There's Packard and then there's everything else." In some ways, the same thing could be said of modern concealed undermount drawer slides. With their gas cylinder dampers, ultra-smooth action, quiet operation, and forgiving installation characteristics, this design could well be considered the gold standard of drawer slides. For a relatively complex design, undermount slides are some of the easiest to install. Only the latching mechanisms, the little orange parts at the right of your picture, are actually fastened to the drawer box, which is positioned over and moves with this rail. Multiple round and slotted mounting points are provided to accommodate most any frame or frameless application. Latches are attached to the drawer front underneath the box and engage this hook at the front of the slide. The unique design does require a few extra steps to prepare the drawer box, like these notches to provide clearance for the slide rails and these 6mm holes to accept the retaining hook at the back of the slide. The width of the drawer in relation to the size of the cabinet opening varies according to the thickness of the drawer box material. There are even micro adjusters at the rear of the slide and on the latch for fine-tuning the elevation and/or tilt of the drawer. This unique rear bracket for face frame applications is designed with some lateral play that to some extent actually helps the drawer self-align to the face of the cabinet. Concealed undermounts are the perfect solution for discerning customers who prefer not to see or have any contact with their drawer operating hardware, but all of this comes at a price. Depending on their features and the specific application, these slides can cost 3 to 4 times as much as epoxy or telescoping ball bearing slides. They are a great addition to high-end installations, but they're just not for every budget. We'll do a separate video on drawer design, but I want to briefly mention the importance of strong drawer box construction. In daily use, a typical drawer gets tugged on and slammed many times. Most of that stress is absorbed where the drawer front joins the sides. This makes strong joinery critical to the drawer's lifespan. To avoid results like this, keep in mind the importance of this joinery when planning your drawer box construction. Some kind of interlocking joint like this tongue and dado will still hold the drawer together even if the glue fails. Frequently, even with standard depth cabinets, some slides and mounting brackets may not reach the back of the cabinet. This is okay in frameless construction, but for face frames, the slide must typically make a solid connection with the cabinet back. Here's a solution. Glue and brad a couple of strips 3 or 4 inches wide to the back. This will usually make up enough of the gap to provide a solid mounting point for the slide brackets. Unusual or unique situations, like the top for this large desk, may require mounting surfaces installed between partitions or end panels, etc. These little spacers or gauge blocks have almost unlimited uses in the shop and on the job site. Here one is being used to position the slide in relation to the partition on the right while the rear bracket is fastened in place. Here a pair of identical blocks establishes the vertical position of a drawer front while it is fastened to the drawer box. Here the blocks are doing two things at once. The one at the back is holding the right distance between the slide and the cabinet end, while the one in front places the slide at the correct depth for these inset faces. Whenever I need a gauge block of a certain size, I'll make several at once and throw them in a box for future use. For really fine adjustments, I use the blocks along with these shims cut from plastic coffee can lids. You may remember from the Drawer Slide Jig video that one of the three critical factors for good drawer alignment and function is that the body of the slide must be square to the cabinet face. The problem is that speed squares and most other squares intended for woodworking don't really work well for this purpose. That's why I like these machinist squares. The longer the blade, the more accurate you'll be, so I'll typically reach for this 12-inch size. Manufacturers' specs for some types of slides, like these concealed undermounts, call for the slide to be set back slightly from the face of the cabinet, in this case 4 millimeters. If you're just putting in a couple of slides, measuring that distance each time may not be so bad, but if you're installing multiple slides at once, it can get to be downright annoying. That's where this little gauge block comes in. It's just a piece of scrap with a rabbet cut in one edge. The rabbet is the same depth as the required setback. Just rest the shoulder of the rabbet on the front of the cabinet and bring the slide up against the edge of the block. Now just drill a pilot hole and fasten the front of the slide in place. Accurately installing slides is tough enough with a reference point like an end panel or a partition nearby. But what do you do in a situation like this, where they are basically suspended in the middle of the cabinet? Believe it or not, you can use the drawer box to actually center itself. Start by supporting the slide or slides at the correct height. This is a perfect place to use the shop-built jig. Loosen any screws holding the rear brackets and establish that the drawer is square to its opening and that the slides are not binding. Now gently slide the drawer out just far enough to mark the bracket locations on the back of the cabinet. Now remove the drawer, locate each slide bracket on the marks you just made, and fasten them in place. Planning drawers for hanging files can be especially tedious. There are lots of hardware options out there, but some, such as the plastic strips, may not hold up that well, and others are ridiculously overpriced. By combining these little steel brackets with some plain old aluminum bar stock, you get a customizable solution that's as flexible as any other and stronger than most. Few things can be as frustrating as having to get on your hands and knees to find some item that's buried at the back of a dark base cabinet. This is the reason that rollout trays and drawers are so popular. In fact, a whole trade subspecialty has developed just for the purpose of retrofitting base cabinets with rollouts. Here are a few tips for doing this yourself at a considerable savings. First, don't think that you have to have full extension slides for this purpose. Unlike drawers, most rollouts are not crammed into a short space that's only slightly taller than the drawer. When you have this kind of access above the drawer box, you don't need the drawer to reach all the way out to the cabinet face. 3/4 extension slides like these affordable epoxies work just fine in most cases. Also, most conventional base cabinets will have at least one fixed shelf, or it's easy enough to add one. These shelves, along with the cabinet bottom, are the perfect place to attach the slides for your rollouts. This means the trays can be made considerably narrower than the cabinet opening, which eliminates potential conflicts with hinge clearances and other issues. These L brackets are manufactured by Blum, but other brands have similar solutions available. I guess this is becoming less of an issue in this age of streaming services, but there are still a lot of audiovisual, physical media out there, and folks need ways to store them. I was stunned at the prices of commercial drawer organizers sold for this purpose. These wood dividers are simple to build with just pennies and scrap wood. We milled these with a box joint jig on the table saw, but you could get the same result with any similar indexing process on the router table. Earlier we looked at how the tabs on telescoping slides can be bent to accommodate a drawer that's a little too narrow for its opening in a frameless application. But what if you have the same problem with a face frame cabinet or a different type of slide? Just shim out the slide using a small flat washer. This slide is mounted behind the face frame because this is an inset application, but the idea would be the same for overlay drawer fronts. Just loosen the mounting screw, slip a washer around its shank, and reinstall the screw. Depending on its diameter and type, flat washers are available in a variety of thicknesses. My personal favorite is this 1/8 inch fender washer, which is usually somewhere between 1/16 and 3/32 of an inch thick. Don't forget to adjust the rear slide mounting point by the same amount so the two slides stay equidistant along their entire length. No matter how perfectly a drawer may be adjusted while the cabinet is still in the shop, strange things can happen during transport and installation of the cabinet. This is why we usually install slides with just one screw in the rear mounting bracket and then add the additional screws after installation. It just makes those final adjustments go that much faster and easier if the floor or wall turns out to be a little wonky and drawer alignment is slightly off as a result.